Greetings. I was inspired a few months ago by an article in Vintage Guitar Magazine that describes something called a DeArmond Tremolo. It's a little electromechanical tremolo that uses a tank of Windex with an electrode in it to alternately ground the signal from the guitar and give you a tremolo effect. Now, I already built one version that differed quite a bit from the way DeArmond built theirs, but this time I wanted to try to stay truer to the original design. So I've gathered just a bunch of old copper and aluminum and other bits and junk and an old range hood vent motor and a few other parts, and I'm going to try to build a replica of a DeArmond Tremolo. It won't look exactly like the original, but hopefully it will function and sound like it. Those of you who are familiar with the way I do these things, you'll know that I don't draw up any sort of plans. All I do is just start cutting pieces of metal and assembling things together. I just play it by ear, and I have a pretty good idea of what these things look like and how they function, and based on that, I'm going to try to make one. If this sounds at all interesting, stay tuned to see how it turns out and how it sounds. Now here's the motor we're going to use. Originally it powered a squirrel cage type fan in a vent hood over a stove. Next we remove the motor from that squirrel cage mounting and take it apart, lubricate it, and make sure that it rotates freely, test it, and then we're ready to proceed. Now this piece of aluminum rod has to be turned with a taper so that it can become the variable speed drive spindle. First we drill a hole into the end of the rod that will slip over the output shaft of the motor. Then we drill and tap a set screw. Then we chuck the aluminum rod up in the lathe and cut a nice taper. So now we have a very smooth running tapered output shaft. Next we'll need to make a motor mount, so we'll cut out an appropriately sized piece of aluminum plate. Then we drill it and bend it, and lo and behold, a motor mount. Then we mount the front portion of the motor to the motor mount. Next we attach the rest of the motor and the tapered drive spindle, and now the drive unit for our tremolo is ready to be installed. Okay, now I'm going to plug it in, make sure that it runs smoothly and quietly. Oh, seems fine to me. Well, I found a rubber O-ring. This is actually a bumper from an old antique pinball machine. But it's what rubs against and follows and spins against the tapered drive spindle. Now I need an aluminum disc to fill the center of this to make the pulley. And I have a 2¼ inch diameter rod of 2024 aluminum. So I'm going to use the cutoff wheel and cut off like a piece of salami here off the end, cut off a disc for my pulley. And here it is. It's about the right width. Now I'm going to have to cut a groove in the circumference of it to hold the O-ring, and then machine some sort of a bearing here in the center. I got a piece of bronze bearing material and turned it down so that it'll fit in here. It's going to be a press fit, which I will do now. Well, I'm machining the pulley here for that O-ring, and as usual it looks like I've removed more aluminum than there is in the pulley. This reminds me of the color of everybody's hair at my last high school reunion. Okay, time to get back to work, but I'm sure that Rusty will help me clean up when I'm done. Rusty, are you going to help me with this aluminum? Are you going to help me to clean up the workshop? Well, it doesn't look too good. Well, here's the water tank. As you can see, it's made out of thin wall copper tubing. I silver soldered a little cap on the rear, and then the front cap machined out of plexiglass. This is the little electrode that will be grounded by the water, and then I drilled and tapped at the center a screw here to allow the water level to be adjusted. and there's a little O-ring under the head of the screw to seal it. This then will be coated with silicone gasket material and then put in for use. I still have to solder a strap on the side so that it can be attached to that arm so that it can rock back and forth. Well, here's that eccentric drive wheel. It's got the pinball bumper O-ring around the perimeter, the bronze center bushing that's offset about 1/8 of an inch so that as it turns it will make the water tank slosh back and forth. And as you can see, I've dynamically balanced it to compensate for the offset. Here's the eccentric wheel mounted on the arm where it will rock back and forth. You can see the eccentricity when I spin it. Then to help the motor bushings cope with the side load from the eccentric wheel and water tank, I machined a brass bushing to support the armature that presses into the motor mount. Here's the final configuration on the drive spindle. As you can see, I've reduced the diameter a little bit here at the large end so that it was 12 millimeters. Now it is 10 millimeters in diameter here at the high speed end and about 2 1/4 millimeters down here at the low speed end. And then I put sort of a rough finish on it so that it would have good traction with the wheel. Also down here I've installed the input jack, output jack, and the intensity pot. Well, I've finally assembled my version of the DeArmond Tremolo, and I thought I'd give you a little tour so you could see how it turned out. Up here is the speed control, and this is intensity, input and output. It really doesn't matter which you plug into. And here is the on-off switch for the motor. I've got it on a sound deadening rubber mat and then on a wooden base with rubber feet. The speed control is very simple. You simply slide it left or right to control the speed of the tremolo. Intensity, you can essentially shut it off or go with the deepest, most intense tremolo you can imagine. Here's that motor that powered the squirrel cage in the vent hood. I protected the connections here so you can't accidentally get shocked. There's the toggle switch that turns it on and off is buried inside. I rounded the corner here of the motor mount to make it look a little nicer. The wiring comes in the wood base and up through the mat, and then I tried to keep it just as hidden as possible, but there's the ground for the chassis and the motor wires, one of which of course goes to the front to the toggle switch and then comes back here. Here's the drive spindle in its final form. I had to reduce the diameter a little bit to slow things down. When this thing gets going too fast, it just kind of gets like a tire that's out of balance. It's 10 millimeters in diameter at this end and about 2 1/4 at that end. It's around a 9-degree slope. Now here's the detail on the speed control. Most of these that I've seen just grab a hold of the arm here and slide it back and forth on a shaft. To me that invites wobbling and all sorts of instability. So I thought it'd be best to move the entire pivoting assembly when you change the speed. So as you slide faster, slower, as you can see the entire pivot is moving. There's a shouldered screw here to contain this slider and hold it in this channel so that it can't wobble in any way. Then we have this aluminum control arm that's going to carry the eccentric wheel and ride on the tapered spindle. You can see how the wheel, I've already shown you a detail of how it ended up. It's balanced. And this is a spring. It acts sort of like a shock absorber to keep this thing from flopping around too much. It sort of keeps it against the spindle and restrains any extraneous movement. Now, and here's the little copper tank. If you look inside, you can see the Windex that's in there. It's about half full. And here's the electrode. Now, the electrode is insulated from the tank. The tank is grounded, the copper tank. And when the fluid rises up and immerses the electrode, it essentially grounds the signal. This is a shielded cable here that brings the signal out to the electrode. So every time that the liquid rises up and touches the electrode, the volume of the signal drops. And then when the liquid moves away from the electrode, the volume of the signal rises. So we end up with a modulated volume, which is the definition of tremolo. So now I'll just kind of zoom back in over it and let you see the details as if you were here to see them in person. Next I'm going to plug it in and you can watch it work, and then we'll hook it up to a guitar and an amp and see how it sounds. Okay, now it's plugged in. I'm going to reach around here and flip the switch, and you'll see that it operates. This will be at its slowest speed. I think you could probably hear the motor running, but it's very quiet, and I think this mat down here, this sound absorbing mat, kind of helps that. But you can see that it moves the tank back and forth and sloshes the fluid. See the fluid sloshing in the tank. Now let's move the speed up a little bit. You'll watch as it moves up the spindle, and it's going to speed up. And then we'll go a little faster. And now we're going pretty close to as fast as it can go. And you'll see the fluid's moving. If you can see it, it's moving rapidly in there. But that's giving us a much higher speed rate on our tremolo. Now we'll bring it back down. You see how smooth it works, and I think a lot of it has to do with the balanced wheel and this method of speed control. Okay, now let's hook it up to an amp and a guitar and see how it sounds. Okay, I've got the little tremolo connected to Silverface Fender Champ. The signal will go directly through the tremolo with no loss or any interference. Okay, I'm just going to play some chords as I adjust the intensity. Fully clockwise like this is the minimum. Now I'll leave the intensity just at the medium setting, and we'll try some different speeds. We'll go down here to a low speed. Then we'll try some different speeds at a very high intensity setting. Well, that about does it for today's video featuring the homemade DeArmond Tremolo. I hope you found it interesting. I still have some more development and improvement to do with this, but for now it works. It is a low-speed tremolo. You really just can't have a reciprocating heavy mass like this going a whole lot faster than what this does without all sorts of bad things happening. So mechanical tremolos like this just have to be a little bit lower speed. I hope you enjoyed what you saw and found it amusing, interesting, and that you'll join me for future videos. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and I hope to see you soon. Thanks for watching.